In this section, we will attempt to give our explanation of why Seattle Public Library is, in the words of Kim Dovey, one of the most disorienting buildings one can imagine. And in order to do this, we're going to be looking at OMA's design process, particularly with respect to their conception of the library users. Our original theory was that the inherent problems of Seattle Public Library was simply an indication of the architects failing to fully put themselves in the shoes of their users. This is something that in psychology is known as perspective taking. However, we were forced to rapidly revise this theory when we read the book made by the Office for Metropolitan Architecture, written by the ethnographer Albina Yanova. And she actually spent a significant amount of time in OMA's offices conducting an ethnographic study. And she documents how the architectural team created a number of one-to-one, in other words, full-size mock-ups. And they actually invited the general public to come and examine some of these mock-ups, including, for example, a mock-up of the spiral of the book ramp, where they invited local wheelchair users to actually test its usability. Our second evidence that OMA actually thought deeply about the library's users was this quote by Matten. And Matten describes the classification system that OMA developed to distinguish between their two primary types of users. Those they termed knowledge acquirers, and these were people coming in and really attempting to deepen and widen their personal body of knowledge. And then the other group, which they termed information gatherers. And these were people who were coming in perhaps with a task to go and find one book and to essentially get in and out in the most efficient and rapid manner. And in this quote here, Matten actually describes the way that OMA conceptualized these two different groups, particularly with respect to their different circulation patterns within the book spiral. Our third piece of evidence is what we are describing OMA's use of personas. Now, a persona is something more typically associated with software design, and it's essentially a description of a user archetype that can serve as a guide in the design process. And it's intended to help designers gain insight. And our evidence for OMA's use of personas were a series of diagrams we came across, which OMA referred to as reference strategy scenarios. And if you look at these diagrams here, you'll see a little caricature of a library user with a speech bubble coming out. And inside the speech bubble, there is a statement of a query or a task. And then on each diagram, you'll see an orange route. And this route essentially is the circulation route through the building that user would need to take in order to fulfill or achieve their need. So we have two different scenarios here, and here we have another pair of scenarios. And as you can see, the routes actually vary through the building depending on the type of user and their particular task. So there's actually strong evidence that OMA have thought quite deeply about the role of the user, and particularly the role of the user with respect to how they move around the building. And this is the public mock-ups of parts of the building, the distinction between these two primary user types, the knowledge acquirers and the information gatherers, and then being able to drill down into these much more specific user scenarios, which we actually felt was quite innovative. So our final conclusion was that we came up with two theories. One is that the desire for usability, which I think is quite clearly demonstrated in the previous slides, at times came into conflict with OMA's occasionally opposing desire to overturn expectations or to be contrary. And in cases where the desire for usability and the desire to be edgy came in opposition, sometimes the desire to overturn expectations or to be architecturally innovative won out at the expense of the building's usability. The second theory is that it's essentially an effect of complexity, that the building is spatially and programmatically so complex that it's simply impossible to predict all interactions that emerge from the interrelation between the two. And it doesn't matter how experienced an architect may be, the final aspects of the use of the building simply become unpredictable when the building is this complex. Now, clearly these theories are not mutually exclusive, and therefore we offer them up today as our theories for why the Seattle Public Library is simultaneously both a stunning architectural experience while simultaneously being fundamentally flawed with respect to certain aspects of its navigation.